Arch the Clown. He is the central figure of the Terrifier franchise, and he first appeared in the anthology All Hallows Eve before getting his own films. Arch is a completely silent, mime-like killer with a somewhat sense of humor. He is dressed in a black and white clown suit with a permanent, sinister grin painted on his face. He communicates only through exaggerated facial expressions and body language, never speaking a word. And what makes him especially unnerving is the combination of his slapstick antics with deeply brutal violence, often treating murder like a joke. Art delights in causing as much psychological and physical suffering as possible. His kills are not just executions, they are twisted, prolonged acts of mutilation, often involving handmade weapons or everyday objects. The most infamous example comes from the first film, where he saws a victim in half upside down. He laugh, mime, and toy with his prey, reveling in their pain like a child playing with a broken toy. And what's more disturbing is that when he's wounded or seemingly killed, he somehow comes back, because there are some supernatural shenanigans involved there, and his exact nature is still a bit vague. Art's popularity exploded with the release of Terrifier 2 and 3, where his violence becomes even more extreme. He has quickly earned a place alongside horror legends, not just for his body count, but for his raw shock factor and unpredictability, thanks to his minimalist but unforgettable design, and his total lack of motive or backstory, which make him pure evil incarnate. And despite the low budget of the first Terrifier film, around $35,000, Arch quickly became a viral sensation due to his gruesome skills and the film's shock value, and Terrifier 2, made with a slightly bigger budget, became a surprise box office success, earning over $15 million worldwide, and the third one making $90 million, with audiences even fainting or vomiting in theaters, a fact proudly marketed by the filmmakers. Cletus Kassady. He is one of Marvel's most terrifying and unhinged serial killers, best known as the host of the Carnage symbiote. Even before bonding with the alien organism, Cletus was already a remorseless killer. Raised in an abusive home, he developed a deeply wrapped psyche early on, killing his grandmother by pushing her down the stairs and torturing animals for fun. By the time he was a teenager, he had committed multiple murders and ended up in prison. There he shared a cell with Eddie Brock, the host of the Venom symbiote. And when Brock's symbiote reproduced, its offspring bonded with Cletus, transforming him into Carnage. As Carnage, Kassady becomes a walking massacre. He fully embraces the symbiote's violent nature. He doesn't kill out of revenge or necessity, he kills because it brings him joy. The symbiote enhances his strength, agility, and durability, and allows him to shape deadly weapons from his own body. And this makes him nearly unstoppable. He's gone on killing sprees that wiped out entire buildings, towns, and even attempted to murder on a global scale, like during the Maximum Carnage and Absolute Carnage events. What makes Carnage even more terrifying than most villains is his complete lack of empathy or purpose. He doesn't want money, power, or control, just destruction for its own sake. He's even clashed with other symbiotes like Venom and Toxin, and at times has been considered the most dangerous symbiote in the Marvel Universe. His ideology is pure chaos, and he's proud of it, seeing himself as an agent of natural selection, where the strong survive and the weak are slaughtered, and the name Carnage was chosen by Kassady himself to symbolize the bloodshed he would bring. Freddy Krueger. He is the iconic villain of a Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and one of the most recognizable figures in horror history. Before becoming a supernatural entity, Freddy was known as the Springwood Slasher, a serial killer who murdered numerous kids. After being arrested but released on a technicality, a group of vengeful parents burned him alive in his boiler room seeking justice. But Freddy didn't die. Instead, he was resurrected as a dream demon, capable of entering the dreams of children and teens and killing them in their sleep. And when victims die in the dream world, they die in real life. Freddy is talkative, sadistic, and theatrical. He taunts his victims with cruel jokes, manipulates their dreams to explode their fears, and often stages elaborate, surreal death scenes. Freddy's dream realm gives him godlike control. He can appear as anything, use impossible physics, or even trap victims in endless nightmares. And he doesn't just kill, he mentally breaks his victims before delivering the final blow, making each encounter with him as psychologically terrifying as it is fatal. Over the course of the franchise, Freddy racks up dozens of on-screen kills, but the implied number is much higher, especially considering the kids he murdered while alive. And despite being killed multiple times, Freddy always finds a way back, feeding off fear and nightmares to regain strength. And fun fact, his signature glove with razor blades was inspired by the director Wes Craven's childhood fear of claws. Chucky. aka Charles Lee Ray, he began as a notorious serial killer known as the Lakeshore Strangler. And after being fatally wounded in a police chase, Charles used a voodoo ritual to transfer his soul into a good guy doll, thus beginning his legacy as Chucky. From that moment on, he becomes one of horror's most recognizable killers. Small but deadly, manipulative, and extremely aggressive. And what makes Chucky uniquely terrifying is the contrast between his innocent, toy-like appearance and his violent, foul-mouthed, murderous behavior. And despite being trapped in a plastic body, Chucky is incredibly dangerous. He uses stealth, manipulation, and brute force to murder his victims, often with kitchen knives, blunt objects, or anything he can get his tiny hands on. He's cunning and persistent, often going to extreme lengths to possess a human body again, usually targeting children or those close to them. Over the years, his motivations have evolved, from trying to regain his humanity to raising a family of killer dolls. But his love for murder never fades. Chucky's reign of terror spans dozens of kills across multiple films and TV series, including Child's Play, its sequels, and the more recent Chucky TV show. He's been burned, melted, shot, exploded, dismembered, and still comes back, either by transferring his soul into new dolls or using voodoo to cheat death. Like I mentioned, his full name is Charles Lee Ray, and it is a nod to real-life killers Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald, and James Earl Ray. Ghostface. He isn't a single person, it's a killer identity adopted by different characters throughout the Scream franchise. First appearing in Wes Craven's Scream in 1996, the original killers were Billy Loomis and Stu Macher, high school students who used the costume and voice changer to orchestrate a series of murders, so anyone can wear the mask, which makes the killer's identity a mystery in each film. And this concept revitalized the slasher genre in the 90s by blending meta-commentary on horror tropes with genuinely suspenseful and bloody kills. Each iteration of Ghostface has a different motive, but all share the same violent tendencies: stalking victims via phone calls, using fear and manipulation to break them down, and then striking with a signature hunting knife and sometimes a shotgun. Ghostface is usually clumsy and more human than supernatural killers like Freddy or Michael Myers. He gets knocked down, hurt, or surprised, but that only makes him more grounded and relatable. Ghostface is driven by everything from revenge and fame to legacy and pure insanity, whether it's a jealous boyfriend, a forgotten family member, or a fame-hungry fan. The one constant is the black robe, the mask, and the inevitable trail of bodies they leave behind. The Ghostface mask was originally a cheap Halloween mask called the Peanut-Eyed Ghost, discovered by a producer scouting locations, and it was licensed and became instantly iconic. And the character often references other horror films, as he is a fan of the genre himself, often citing classics like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Psycho before slicing up his victims. Kevin. A silent, cannibalistic serial killer in Frank Miller's Sin City universe, and he lives at the Old Town Farm and preys primarily on prostitutes. His kills are fast, methodical, and ritualistic. He murders women, dismembers them, and then eats their flesh, preserving their heads as trophies. He moves like a ghost and kills with deadly efficiency, often without making a sound. And despite his frail appearance, Kevin is a great fighter, capable of taking down even the toughest man in Sin City. He proves this when he goes toe-to-toe with Marv, one of the most brutal characters in the series, and holds his own for a shocking amount of time. His fighting style is unnerving, fast, silent, and almost supernatural in speed. He also has a twisted relationship with Cardinal Roque, who protects Kevin due to his belief that the killer is carrying out a divine mission. And this alliance allows Kevin to operate freely, killing dozens of women before finally being stopped. His boyish appearance and mute behavior make him easy to underestimate, which only adds to his horror. But he doesn't need a motive or words. His actions are pure, calculated violence. He doesn't feel guilt or hesitation, and even when captured, he doesn't beg, speak, or show fear, which makes him feel more like a force of nature than a man. Kevin appears in The Hard Goodbye, the first major storyline in Sin City, and was portrayed by Elijah Wood in the 2005 film adaptation. And the actor performed many of Kevin's silent movements himself, and the character has become a cult horror figure, remembered for his haunting stillness, iconic glasses, and the grotesque display of severed heads in his lair. Leatherface. He is a chainsaw-wielding killer at the heart of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Leatherface is a hulking, mentally disturbed man who wears masks made of human skin, hence the name. He doesn't speak and often behaves like a child, under the command of his twisted, cannibalistic family. But when he snaps, he becomes a relentless force of violence, slaughtering victims with brute strength and his signature chainsaw. His kills are fast, chaotic, and raw, often involving meat hooks, mallets, or industrial tools used in grotesque ways. He doesn't kill out of sadism or revenge, but rather out of obedience or fear, acting under his family's orders or reacting to intrusions into their decaying Texas home. And this twisted family dynamic makes him more tragic than most slashers, a product of isolation, abuse, and madness turned into a butcher of the innocent. Over the years, His story has been reimagined in reboots, sequels, and prequels, but the core remains: a brutal, inhuman killer whose silence is more terrifying than words. And he chases trespassers, turned in rural Texas into a nightmare landscape of meat hooks and bone furniture. Leatherface was inspired in part by real-life killer Ed Gein, whose crimes also inspired Norman Bates and Buffalo Bill. The character was first portrayed by Gunnar Hansen, who studied mentally impaired children to capture the character's mannerisms, and the chainsaw became his iconic weapon purely for budget reasons. And over time, Leatherface has become a core member of horror's slasher Mount Rushmore, standing alongside Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers. Frank Zito. He is the protagonist and killer in the 1980 movie Maniac, a psychological slasher film that dives into the mind of a serial killer rather than focusing solely on his crimes. Frank is a mentally ill man living alone in New York City, tormented by a traumatic past, especially abuse from his mother, who's worked as a sex worker and subjected him to emotional and possibly physical torment. And this trauma fuels his homicidal urges, especially toward women, whom he blames for his emotional suffering. Frank stalks and murders women with chilling deliberation, then sculpts his victims and nails their hair to mannequins that he keeps in his apartment, treating them as his twisted companions. He often enters a trance-like state before attacking, consumed by hallucinations and voices from his past. His preferred weapons are knives and shotguns, and the murders are often sudden and shocking, with victims killed at close range. As the film progresses, Frank's mental state deteriorates rapidly, his grip on reality weakens, leading to increasingly erratic and paranoid behavior, and his final descent is marked by hallucinations of his mannequins and victims turning on him. And unlike many slashers, Frank isn't a masked figure of mystery. He's fully visible, vulnerable, and human, which makes his crimes feel all the more real and uncomfortable. And his character doesn't rely on jump scares or supernatural elements, just pure psychological horror grounded in a terrifyingly realistic portrayal of mental illness and isolation. The film became notorious for its gritty violence and disturbing tone, especially a shotgun scene featuring groundbreaking effects by Tom Savini. The movie was heavily censored and even banned in several countries due to its brutality. A remake was released in 2012, offering a modern, first-person perspective that made the murders feel even more intimate and unnerving. And despite its controversial nature, Maniac has gained cult status as one of the most unsettling portraits of a serial killer in horror history.